So after 25 years that I have the zchus and the privilege to be together with you at this Yarchei Kallah, it started off when we were all young people, younger light.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Is it working in the back or not? Yes or no?
So after 25 years that I have this privilege, I'm still moved every time, every year, to see hundreds of American Balabatim coming to Eretz Yisrael, not to tour, not to look around, not to visit, but just to learn Torah in Avira di Yisrael. And as Rabbi Gottesman just mentioned, I just got in from America a few hours ago, and this was a very intense, short visit. Detroit, Woodmere, and then the Shabbos, the weekend at the Chemed Conference. And I am always so nispoil by our wonderful Balabatim in America. Professionals, doctors, businessmen, lawyers, learning Torah be'iyun, writing chaburis, and it's just amazing. We are living in an amazing time. There is no doubt that the level and intensity of Omer Torah in Eretz Yisrael is unparalleled. Nowhere in the world is there that much limud and iyun as in Eretz Yisrael. But what we desperately lack in Eretz Yisrael is Balabatim like you and Balabatim like American Balabatim, that in the workforce, professionals, and really dedicating hours for Talmud Torah be'iyun. So for me, it's a very special feeling to come to this Yarchei Kallah every year, and I just daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moed ala over v'tzayek ala osid. None of us is getting younger. Whenever I say at home I'm an old man, my children protest. But I'm not a young man, let's put it that way. So I daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ko Yetan Hashem v'Ko Yosef, we should be able for many wonderful years to come to learn together and to be Magdil Torah U'Ma'adira. So this year you chose Choshe Mishpat. Hilchas Alvoa and Orav are two different sugis, and we need at least a year to learn Dinei Orav and Dinei Halvoa. So I will try, as always, to give some introductory remarks and yesodis, just to help the Olam learn the Sugya Be'iyun. Im Kesef Talve Es Ami, a posik in last week's parsha, Im Kesef Talve Es Ami Es Uni Imach, Lo Yisi Elai Kanoisha V'Lo Yisi Simen Olav Neshech. So I'm happy that at least you didn't bundle in ribbis as well, because it's the same posik. You might as well learn ribbis as well. So, im kesef talve es ami, we could understand this posik if you will lend money, then we have two lavim. One is lo yisi elai kanaisha, and the other lo yisi olav neshech. But the Mechilta says im kesef talve is not a reshus mitzvah, and it is in the Rambam. And I read the very first halach in Hilchas Alvoa of the Rambam. Mitzvahs say, להלוויס לעוני ישראל, שנאמרם כסף תלווס עמי, אז עונימך, יוכל רשוס, תלמיד לומר, הווה תביתנו. And the source of this Rambam is in the Mechilta. And the Rambam, once again, a Sefer HaMitzvahs, Kuf Tzadik Zayin, and a Choshe Mishpat. Very first Sif, Tzadik Zayin, Sif Aleph. The Abar Benel, his interpretation in his Perashat Torah is Im Kesef Talves Amirishus. It should be no wonder. The Abar Benel, like many early Sephardi commentators, in their Pirushim and Tanakh and the Torah, many times did not follow the Mesilas of Chazal, and they preferred to be Mefarish Psukei HaTorah Lefi Pshutan, but all the Poskim, Rambam, Shulchan Aruch, the Tur, and all the others, quote the Mechilta, Im Kesef Tal Ve'esami is not if, but you should. It's not a reshus, but rather a mitzvah. What is somewhat puzzling is it a mitzvah or a chiyuv? Regarding mitzvah tzedakah, we have rules, we have guidelines. We are all familiar with Meiser, with Chaimish. I think the super wealthy should give Chaimish, others should give Meiser. How much money should a person dedicate for loans? Nowhere in the Poskim do we find a source. If it would be a chiyuv, then it must be defined. How could there be a chiyuv that is ill-defined or not defined as all? So, Kesef Tal Ve'esami, mitzvah. And that is the Rambam, Shulchan Aruch, and all the other poskim. If it is a mitzvah, one would ask, how much? And nowhere do we find how much. One argument might be, it is part of your tzedakah money. It is part of your meiser or chaimish, whatever you give. And therefore, it would be a chiyuv. No, that is not correct. One cannot say that part of your meiser money must be loans. No. Meiser ksofim is derived from maser oni, and it is about giving away. So I paskin for many people. Many people want to give meiser, but they would want to hold on to that money till they marry off their children. I know I have 10 kids. They're going to sit in Kallah. I will need a lot of money to support my children. Could I save my meiser money for 10 years till my children will get married? No. You need to give away meiser. However, my psak to many people is, you could put your money, your meiser money, into a kupas gemach, and you will be doing mitzvahs all the time with your money, and when time comes, you could take that money out of your gemach and support your children that are learning. But nowhere do we find that part of your meiser money should be loans. Im kesef tal ve'esami is a separate mitzvah. It is not tzedakah. Meiser is in hilchas tzedakah. Kesef tal ve'esami is hilchas halvor. They're not the same. And therefore, the only sensible conclusion would be, mitzvah lahalvos, it is not a chiyuv. And I think at some previous shiurim I said, at this wonderful kenes of Yarchei Kallah, I do not recall when and what the sugya was, but I explained. There are 3 different categories of mitzvahs, and not only 2. In the yeshivish world, we are familiar with mitzvahs chiyuviyos and mitzvahs kiyumiyos. Mitzvahs chiyuviyos are mitzvahs that rest upon each and every yid, and this is what you need to do. And that is all the mitzvahs of Seder Hayom, Mea Bruchas B'Kol Yom, Kriya Shema, and so many other mitzvahs that are incumbent upon every individual. Hanochas Tefillin. Mitzvahs kiyumiyos are mitzvahs that only are a chiyuv if you engage in an activity that lekesha atzma is not a mitzvah. The most potent example is tzitzis. You're not chayiv in tzitzis unless you decide to wear dalet kanfus. You never will be chayiv in tumas amaisis unless you decide to eat peres sheyesh b'hem kedushas eretz Yisrael. You never will be chayiv in shchita unless you decide to eat meat, and those are defined as mitzvahs kiyumiyos. But there's a third category, mitzvahs shel reshus. If you do it, you have a mitzvah. You don't do it, you don't necessarily have an aveda. And the most obvious example is achilas truma lekohen. The Rambam in the very vast halacha of Hilchas Trumas writes the Rambam, kohen sheyochel truma mevorech, asher kedeshona b'kedushosa shel ha'ara v'tzivono lechol truma. But a kohen never has a chiyuv to eat truma. If he will eat truma, he has a mitzvah. If he abstains from eating truma, he will never have an avera. Unlike achilas kochim, unlike achilas matzah. So this category is defined mitzvah shel rishus. Kiyum mitzvah yesh ba, bitul mitzvah ein ba. So the mitzvah of haloah obviously would be the same. If it would be a chiyuv, we need to know how much one needs to give, when one needs to give, but we do not find that. So it is a mitzvah, but not necessarily a chiyuv. However, there is a lo ta'aseh as well. Let's go back to halacha aleph in the Rambam, the very first halacha in Hilchos Halavah.
So page 82 and 83.
Mitzvah saseh lahalves la'aniyei Yisrael, shene'emar am kesef tal ve'es ami, ve'mitzvah zu gedoylo min hatzedakah, al ha'oni hashoyel, שזה כבר נצרך לשאול וזה עדיין לא הגיע למידה זו. And this is very interesting. Haloah is not a chiyuv, but it's a greater mitzvah than tzedakah. And why is that? Tzedakah demands more sacrifice. You're giving away money, and you never expect to get that money back. Ma she'en ken haloah. But judging by the result, haloah is a greater mitzvah than tzedakah. Because lending money to a person many times would save him from sinking into poverty. And you're salvaging a person, helping him to save his business, to thrive, to be able to sustain his family, and that is why it's such a great mitzvah. And now the Rambam writes, V'atorah hokpido al mi sheyamona melahalvos le'oni shenemar v'ro eincho ba'ochicho ho'ev yoin. This posuk is not a mishpotim. This posuk is in Parshas Re'ei. And some of you will probably remember what is the context of this posuk. It is Shmitas Ksofim. And the Torah says, when Shnas HaSheva arrives, all loans are annulled. And the recipients of loans, how do you say a loiva in English? I don't know. The borrower no longer needs to pay the loan. And then the pasuk says, Hishom alacho, pen yeh dovar im levavcho b'leyal, leimor korvu shnas hasheva, v'ro eincho b'ochicho hu'evyon. Be careful. The Rambam writes, Hikpidu Torah ala nimnu melahalvos lechaveiroi. Is that allowed? If a person refuses to give a loan, is he over an alav? I don't think so. The lashon of the Rambam is not v'hanimne melahalvos bitel mitzvah, hanimne melahalvos over aloisasa. Hikpidu Torah ala nimne melahalvos lechaveiroi. Perik tes halacha lamed in Hilchos Shmita v'Yovel. I doubt it's in our book. Maybe it is. Perik tes halacha lamed Hilchos Shmita v'Yovel. The Rambam writes, if one abstains from giving a loan, mepachad hashmito, over aloises shenemar, hishom elacho, v'ro eincho b'ochicho ho'ev yoin. So the Rambam in Hilchos Shmita v'Yovel writes very clear, Ovar b'lo ta'aseh. When is he over b'lo ta'aseh? If the reason he doesn't want to give the loan is because he is afraid of Shmitas Ksofim. But all the other 6 years, if for any reason he doesn't feel like giving this loan, the Rambam doesn't write Ovar b'lo ta'aseh, rather Hikpidu Torah, ala nimne melahalvos lechaveiroi. My Talmidim for many years know that one of the Yesodis I speak about again and again because there's a big arichas in Minchas Osha on the concept of Rotzoin HaTorah. It is not only Tariag mitzvahs, but we are to observe Rotzoin HaTorah, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu expresses His will in many ways in Torosenu HaKedosha. And the Rambam is the Gadol of words. Nobody used words better than the Rambam. And the Rambam is medayek b'lshonoi. In Shmita v'yovel, hanimne malahal Weiss mepachad hashmita, over below ta'aseh. In Hilchas Alvoah, hikpidu Torah al hanimne malahal Weiss lechavele. What we learn from the Pasuk in Parshas Re'eh is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is unhappy with people that will not give loans because they're afraid I might not get the money back. So according to the Rambam, the mitzvah of haloah is only a mitzvah asay. It is not an asay v'lo ta'aseh. Rabbeinu Yonah has a different opinion. Chelek Gimel Seif Samach Zayin in Sharei Tshuva. How would I know whether it's in the book or not? 206. So Rabbeinu Yonah in Sharei Tshuva, yeah. The Rambam writes very clear, Hanimne malahalvois lechaveroi mipachad hashmito. Yeah, it depends on your rationale, on the reason. And the Rambam follows the lesson of the Pasuk. Hishom alacho pen yedovo im levavcho belial leimor karvo shnasa sheva. That is what you're afraid of. So Rabbeinu Yonah, we all know that Rabbeinu Yonah is a Musa Sefer. But Chelek Gimel of Rabbeinu Yonah is actually not Musar. Rabbeinu Yonah compiled a long list of mitzvahs that people aren't enough aware of, and there's a lack of awareness that these are mitzvahs and not only nice things to do. So Rabbeinu Yonah writes, Lo ysikbas es yadchum achicha hu'ev yoin, Hishom elochem ben yedoverem levavchu beliyalem ekorvu shnas hasheva. Lemadnu mizeh, ki animna melahal Weiss la'oni oiver b'shnei lavim. He's not talking about dafka mepached hashmito like the Rambam. So according to Rabbeinu Yonah, this lav, this lo ta'aseh, applies not only to the Shemitah year, but to all 7 years. So this is a machlokes, Rambam and Rabbeinu Yonah. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, mitzvah haloah is asay v'lo ta'aseh. According to the Rambam, it is only a mitzvah asay. So if it is a lo ta'aseh, how could we say it's a reshus? It can be a reshus. If you abstain, you're over balav. So according to the Rambam, I said, it's a reshus. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, we will ask once again, what's the shiur? According to Rabbeinu Yonah, it depends if a person asked for a loan. Unlike tzedakah, which is upon you, and you don't need to wait, you should not wait till somebody knocks on your door asking for money. You need to put aside money, whether it's Meiser or a Chaimish or whatever it is. Loans is only if a person asks for a loan and you have money that's available and you don't want to give a loan because you're afraid you're not going to get your money back. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, that is the lav. And in those circumstances, it is a chiyuv and not only a reshus. Rabbi Yerucham Fishel Perlo, the Mechaber of Sefer HaMitzvahs LaRasag, LeRabbeinu Sadia Goen, and maybe some of you heard this strange phrase of mine because I use it quite a lot. And I say, Sefer HaMitzvahs LaRasag Shel Rabbi Yerucham Fishel Perlo. Who was Rabbi Yerucham Fishel Perlo? He was a phenomenal Gadol B'Yisrael, pre-Holocaust Varsha. He was not a Klei Kodesh. He was just a Yoshev Oyel. And when he published his Sefer HaMitzvahs LaRasag, the Torah world was just shocked and taken aback by his godless. Who wrote the Sefer? Is it Rabbeinu Sadia Gaon or Reb Fishel Perlo? Both. Rabbeinu Sadia Gaon wrote a poem, and like many early Sephardi giants, he was the greatest Rosh Hashiva in Bavel. He was the Gadol Ador. He was the Poisek. He was the first great Jewish philosopher before the Moreh Nevuchim, and much of the Moreh Nevuchim is based on Sefer Emunos V'Deos Shel Rabbeinu Sadia Gaon. And he was also a paitan and a mishorer, like many early Sephardi Gedolim. He wrote a Shiur. It is a poem, and the Fishel Perlo takes this poem and he turns it into a Sefer HaMitzvahs. So in this poem, the Fishel Perlo, the Rabbeinu Sadia Gaon, touches upon all the Taryag mitzvahs. There are only two other Gedolim, to the best of my knowledge, that did something similar. Ibn Gvirol, and 600 years later, the Meir Nesivim, a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, and he also wrote a poem on all the Taryag mitzvahs. The Fishel Perlo takes this poem and develops a Sefer HaMitzvahs LeRabbeinu Sadia Gaon, and that's why whenever I quote him, I say, Sefer HaMitzvahs LeRasag, Shed Fishel Perlo. But what is a historical surprise, the Fishel Perlo wasn't aware that Rabbeinu Sadia Gaon actually wrote a Sefer HaMitzvahs, which he wasn't aware of. And the real Sefer HaMitzvahs LeRasag not always coincides with the Sefer HaMitzvahs LeRasag of the Fishel Perlo. So either Rabbeinu Sadia Gaon wasn't consistent and the poem doesn't coincide with his Sefer HaMitzvahs, or maybe sometimes the Fishel Perlo's interpretation of the Rasag is not correct. But anyway, the Fishel Perlo, mitzvah say Chof Tes, dealing with the mitzvah of Halvoah, asks, according to Rabbeinu Yoina, that Kallah nimna melahalves lechaveira oiva below tasa, how could the Mechilta say, Yachol Rishos, Talmud loy merhavit haviteno, mitzvah? How could you have a havim in it that it's a Rishos if he's over belav? So that's a gewaldige kasha. And I say, well, after all, the Ben Yonah probably was aware that one could interpret this posik like the Rambam understood it, that the lav applies only on nimnim alahalvis lechaveroim epachad hashmito, but it does not refer to all the other 6 years. So if we would say im kesef talva es ami rishus, that would reflect on the way we understand v'ro eincho b'ochicho evyon, and then our interpretation of the law would be only shnasa shmita. But because we know that im kesef talva es ami is a mitzvah, then we prefer to explain and to maintain that v'ro eincho b'chicho evyon is lav dafka pachet ashmita. So before we move on, one additional comment. The Rambam's shitta fits in better with the Loshen Aposek, with the text. Hishomalacho pen yiyeh dover im levavchu beliyah lemor karvu shnas sheva v'ro eincho b'chicho evyon. So the Aposek clearly refers to a person that abstains from lending money because he is afraid of Shemitah. But the Svara is more like Rabbeinu Yoina. Before Shnas HaShvius, he has more reason to be afraid I am risking my money. Because if he's not going to pay on time, then he won't pay at all. So what is the Svara? If a person abstains from giving a loan before Shnas HaShmita, he is over belav. But if he does the same without any reasonable risk. If he's not going to pay, you're going to nudge him. You're going to call him to Beis Din. Your money is not going to be lost, and he is not over balav. So mistaver kedivre Rabbeinu Yoina. But the lashon of the pasuk is more in accordance to the Rambam's opinion. So this.
How does the Rambam go the first part a regular year? Like the third is not for that year. That second part is continuation of the
That is Poshet the Svara. If the Torah is makbid b'shnas sheva, kal v'chomer, the Torah is makbid in any other year. But according to the Rambam, the lav is ein lacho elo masha omru Torah. But that is a Poshet the Svara. The kpeid has not been odom l'mokoim. Essentially, at the end of the day, these are mitzvahs bein odom l'chaveiroi. And therefore the Rambam writes, from that posuk referring to Shnas Shemitah, we know she'ekpido Torah ala nimne melahal Weiss l'chaveiroi. Coming back to the Rambam, mitzvah lahal Weiss la'oni mi Yisrael. Is there a mitzvah to give loans to people that are not poor, that are not desperate? In the Rambam, it seems to be clear the mitzvah is only to lend money to an oni. The Tur and the Shulchan Aruch clearly say that the mitzvah applies to Ashirim as well. Which page is that, the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch? Three, five? Okay. Rav Shapiro, did you learn this entire book?
Yes, he did.
This should take 2 years to learn.
No problem.
Siman Tzedek Zayin, Sif Aleph, mitzvah saseh lahal v'slani Yisrael, v'hi mitzvah gedol yoisem and tzedakah. That is derived from the Rambam. We learned just a few minutes ago. V'afilu oshir shetzorech lahalvois mitzvah lahalvoisoi lefisho. And the Beis Yosef follows the footsteps of the Tur, that this mitzvah applies not only to an oni, but to an oshir as well.
What if he's
But
about giving him eitzes, the gevir that from deine eitzes?
oh, very much so.
He doesn't realize.
You know, there's a Gvir that lost his money, and then he complained, I lost my money, but I didn't lose my brains. 2 years ago, everybody came to be shoyal eitzah. Nobody's coming anymore. So he didn't get it. Why is nobody coming to ask my eitzes? So sometimes the Gvir really needs eitzes. But we'll talk about this in just a moment. So the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch says that the mitzvah is for Osher as well and Arononi. But the Pasuk says, Im kesef talve es ami es oni imach. So the Pasuk seems to clearly be talking about aniyim. So where does this come from? Afela Oshir mitzvah lahal v'yisloi lefi sho. There are two different approaches. One is, well, Rashi on the Posek as oni imach, Rashi writes, when you lend a person money, you should feel like an oni. You should identify, you should feel his pain. But that is obviously drash, not pshat. So one approach to the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch would be, Oshir, if he's strapped for cash and he doesn't have liquidity, is like a oni. In Masechet Peah, there's a halacha that a oshir that is away from home could take maser oni. Maser oni clearly is designated for aniyim. So in days of yore, when you were away from home, it didn't matter that you have 100 heads of cattle at home on your ranch, and you have 1,000 chickens in your pen. You're away from home, you could starve from hunger. Unlike our age, I am a very primitive person. I'm still in the age of credit cards. Recently, a person asked me, bought some sforim, could I pay in bit? And I said, what's bit? Bitcoin you want to give me? I didn't know what bit is and what Zelle is. I didn't know whether you have bit in America, but those are modern methods of payment. So today, wherever you are in the world, your money is available. But in days of yore, you were away from home. Didn't matter how rich you are at home, you could die from hunger. So maybe in that case, the Oshir is defined as an Oni. I think the Bir Agudah is a more reasonable pshat. And the Bir Agudah on this Shulchan Aruch writes that the source of the Shulchan Aruch is in Sukkah Memtes. Sukkah Memtes, the Gemara differentiates between the mitzvah of tzedakah and the mitzvah of Gemilas Chasodim. Tzedakah b'memoinoi, Gemilas Chasodim bein b'memoinoi bein begufoi. Tzedakah la'oni, Gemilas Chasodim bein la'oni bein la'oshia. So when the two on the Shulchan Aruch write, Afilu oshi shetzorech lahalvois mitzvah lahalvoisa lefisho, that is not the mitzvah of Im Kesef Talva Es Ami. Im Kesef Talva Es Ami is only for Aniyim. And the Tur, if he would come to disagree with the Rambam, he would write, I disagree with the Rambam, which he does not. And therefore, it is clear to me that the way to learn the Tur in the Shulchan Aruch is Afilu oshi mitzvah lahalvoisa lefisho. That is not the mitzvah of Haloah, but the general mitzvah of Gemilas Chasodim. And that is why the Rambam writes, Afilu oshir shetzorech lahalvois mitzvah lahalvois lefisho, v'lahanoisoi av bidvorim, uleyatzoi eitzo ha'oigenes lo. Reb Shlomo asked just a moment ago, and he fled before hearing my tshuva. Maybe he didn't expect to hear one. So it is clear from the lashon of the Rambam, Oshir, the mitzvah lahalvois lo, is the same mitzvah as liyatzoi eitzo ha'oigenes, lahanoisoi bidvorim. It is the general mitzvah of Gemilas Chasodim. And the Rambam in Perek Yud Aleph, the Locha Aleph and Ilchas Ovel says that the general mitzvah of Gemilas Chasodim, its source is V'yohavto l'reacho kamoicho. And that is why the Rambam writes, Oshir, if he needs money, you have a mitzvah to help him. It is not the mitzvah of Im Kesef Talva Es Ami. Esa oni imoch. That is only for aniyim. But there's another mitzvah, just caring for people. And that is V'yohavto l'reacho kamoicho. And that is why the Rambam writes, Liyatzoi eitza ha'oigenes lo, and lahanoisoi bidvorim, and therefore the source would be Sukkah Memtes. The differences between Gemilas Chasodim and Haloah. And that very same Gemara says, Gemilas Chasodim bein begufoi bein b'memoinoi, and that is liyatzoi bidvorim, and Gemilas Chasodim bein la'oni u bein la'oshia. Oh, that's a good question. The revusa that Oni Koidim is not only that a Oni comes before Oshia. Wouldn't that be Poshut? Wouldn't that be Poshut? If you have Shnei Aniyim, one is more desperate than the other. It is clear in Hilchas Tzedakah you need to help the more desperate one. The revusa of Oni before Oshia is, my money is better guaranteed if I'll give a loan to Oshia. I'm confident he's going to be able to pay it back. If I lend money to an owner, that's a greater risk. So could a person calculate and say, I'm a kaima mitzvah, I have $1,000 to lend. I could lend an Oshia, and be confident I'll get my money back and I still have a mitzvah? Or am I required to lend to an oni, having a somewhat greater mitzvah, but putting my money at a greater risk? That's the levusa that oni comes before a oshia. Because actually, in being Mekayim the mitzvah, what's the levusa? Of course, an oni comes before a oshia. Even two aniyim, if one needs food and the other needs garments, ksus, food comes before ksus. That's a befresh halacha. So what would be the levusa that only comes before oshia? So my understanding is it legitimate for a person to say, I'm going to lend this money, and regardless to whom I lend this money, I still have a mitzvah. So am I entitled to say, I want to be Mekayim the mitzvah in a way I could feel confident I'm going to get my money back, and that is giving a loan to oshia. If I give a loan to anoni, I'm not allowed to be afraid. But if I could be a Mekayim a mitzvah with either of the two, I would prefer giving a loan to oshia. Kamash malon, oni comes before an oshia.
Why the road I think Oni is the type insurance? Oni is the third. So an Oni is the place he has no money, or an usher is the place he needs a loan. This is the same third. And the third is Oni because that's the norm. That normally that's.
We assume that an oni is in greater desperation than an oshia. I think that is a fair, logical assumption. It's usually that way. There are cases, extreme cases, which may be different. The Machne Ephraim, Siman Aleph and Hilchos Tzedakah says that the mitzvah of haloah is only if somebody is asking for a haloah. As long as no one asks for haloah, there is no mitzvah. And in a way, the Machne Ephraim comes to solve the problem I asked at the beginning of this year. When exactly would a person have a chiyuv to give a loan? And I said it depends on the Shalit Shuvah and the Rambam. According to Shalit Shuvah, if it's a lav, it must be a chiyuv in some way, sometimes, otherwise how could it be a lav? According to the Rambam, we could assume it's a mitzvah, but it's a reshus. But the Machne Ephraim wants to be medayik from the Rambam that the mitzvah is only if somebody is asking for a loan. Do we have Hilchos Matnas Aniyim, Perek Daled, or Perek Zayin? It is in... So the Rambam in Hilchos Matnas Aniyim says that the mitzvah of tzedakah, and not necessarily haloah, is only if an oni asks for money. The Rashba says the same in Shavuos Daf Chof Hei. The Gemara says if a person makes a shavua not to give tzedakah, that shavua is not valid because he's nishba levatel es a mitzvah. And the Rambam asks, am I mechuyev to do tzedakah to everyone? All the aniyim in the world are my call? And the Rashba says, no. Nishbe levatel es a mitzvah is when a person makes a shavua enough to give tzedakah when an oni stretches out his hand. And the Machne Ephraim wants to learn from the Rambam and the Rashba that the entire mitzvah of tzedakah, and not only giving a loan, is only when there's an oni befanenu and he asks for money. Lani Ezdati, it is more reasonable to assume it's not a technicality that he needs to ask, but if there is no one else available to help him, then you have a chiyuv to give tzedakah, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, to give a loan as well. And these are circumstances that are very common. A family member or a close chavrusa, he's not at a point in which he is a nitzrach el harabim. He does not go collecting, but you know that he's desperate. Even if he isn't asking you for money, that is your chiyuv to give tzedakah. So when the Rashba says, not all the aniyim in the world are my call, that is correct. That is a Gemara Nedorim. Lav kol de ma'ani alai didi nafal. There are many people out there, they're all a chayiv in tzedakah, and many aniyim are mechazer ala psochim, as we all know, and therefore you're not mechuyev to help them all. But if you are aware of a person that is in need, and you are a relative, a friend, and you know there aren't other people to help him, then you have a chiyuv of giving tzedakah or offering a loan. So this is not a technicality that he needs to ask in order you should have a mitzvah to give. The difference is this associated with you? Is he an oni that's mechazer ala psochim? And there are many other people that will help him, then you are not mechuyev to give. But if you are aware of his need and desperation and others are not, then you have the chiyuv. So now I want to go over from the mitzvah to give loans to the mitzvah of paying loans, priyas balchoiv mitzvah, which is Erech in Chov Beis, Ksubis Peivav. And many times I say, if people will be more diligent in Priyas Balchoiv Mitzvah, it'll be far easier to get loans. And the reason many people don't want to give loans and very reluctant to give loans is because many times those loans are not paid. And I know a lot of wealthy people, when you ask for a loan, he says, no, I don't give loans. I prefer giving you tzedakah. So you ask for $30,000 a loan, and he will tell you, I'll give you a matana $15,000, but I won't lend you $30,000 because he's afraid that he'll never get that money back. And if you are wealthy, chances are you'll never get that money back. For all the people that owe me money would pay, I could buy an apartment. Not in a matashkol, but a little one somewhere out there. And I have no tinus, because the people that owe me money, I think really don't have. And I see it like a noisha. I believe if they'll have, they'll probably pay. If I nudge them, they probably will be more forthcoming, but I see it like a noisha. Priyas Balchoiv is a chiyuv. And if people will be more careful about Priyas Balchoiv, I think it'll be far easier to achieve loans. And there's a reason why people are reluctant to give loans. And al pi halacha, if you have reason to believe that the person won't pay, you're not mechiyuv to lend. If you lend money to this person in the past and he did not pay and he asks for a loan, you are not mechuyuv to give a loan. Because a loan was not meant to be a matana. A gift is a gift and a loan is a loan. And if you have reason to be choshish that he's not going to pay, either you gave him a loan in the past and he didn't pay, or you know that he's not paying loans he took from others, you are not mechuyev to give that loan. Are you allowed to give? You're always allowed to give, assuming that the loan might turn into a gift. Oh, if you bear in mind, if he doesn't pay, you're going to be moichel, then you could give that loan. But if you won't be moichel, that's a very important comment. It's not only that you're not mechuyev, maybe you shouldn't, because you're going to be over and if nayiva lo titen michshel. But we should always have an ayin tova and believe people have a cheskes kashrus. Hopefully they will pay. But once again, if you have real reason to doubt whether he will pay, you're not mechuyev to give that loan. So there's an amazing tzosach hoshen, it's a mekuv dalet sif cotton beis. And the tzosach hoshen says something that all the lenders will be very troubled about. And the tzosach hoshen says, you do not need to pay a loan until the lender comes to ask for the money. As long as he doesn't ask, you don't need to pay. What is he talking about? Person has many loans. And according to fundamental halacha, first to get is the first to pay. And there is shibid nechosim. The first to get the money,
364 at the bottom.
364, but we will not learn the full text because it's a tzosach hoshen. It's not one line like the Rambam. I'm just explaining what he's dealing with. So I own because the mitzvah of haloah is a different mitzvah. It's not the mitzvah of tzedakah, and therefore the shiurim of Weiss and Chomish don't apply to haloahs. They apply to the mitzvah tzedakah and not to the mitzvah of haloah. By fundamental definition, Maisa needs to go to aniyim and only as a gift to aniyim. Maisa ksufim we learn from Maisa oni. The reason we are makel by Maisa ksufim to include any dvar mitzvah, and as I indicated before, even putting your money into gemach, is only because we're makel to the Bach and the Chsam Sofer and many other achronim that Meiser is a minhag and a midas chasidus and not a chiyuv. But the Ramah in Simeresh Memtes says Meiser is only tzedakah la'aniyim, not achnusas Kallah, not achzukas haTorah, not binyan beis hamedrash, only tzedakah la'aniyim. The Prisha and the Bach disagree, and our minhag is based on the Bach and the Prisha. So halvoes is not tzedakah, and it has nothing to do with meiser or choimish, even though it might be a chiyuv. It's a mitzvah to say. Oh, I do not recall in 25 years whether we had a shiur, whether we ever dealt with the topic of how much money does a person need to spend on mitzvahs. I think we did. Some distant memory. In our weekly shiurim? Okay, sometimes I get confused. At this stage of my life, I remember what I say, but I never would remember what I said, where and when. So, what is tzosach hoshen dealing with? Many people owe me money, or I owe many people money, and the halacha is the first to give is the first to be paid. However, if my lenders, the earlier ones, didn't ask for the money back, and a later lender asked for his money back, I need to give to the one that asked for his money, because that those that did not ask for the money, I don't have a chiyuv right now. And the one that asked for his money, I have a chiyuv to pay him. So what the tzosach hoshen is machadish, as long as a person doesn't ask for his money back, there is no chiyuv of priyas balchayiv. And that would be extremely troubling, because we expect people, when time is up, to come and pay, and we shouldn't need to run after them. Maybe we will briefly discuss Loisia like Kenosha, which is also very important. The Ktsaisa Choshen wants to prove his point from a Sif in Shulchan Aruch Siman Ayin Gimel, Anishba lefroy a chayiv. If a person made a shavua to pay a chayiv, obviously the lender was reluctant, and he said, I will lend you money if you swear to pay back on time. And he swore. And the Shulchan Aruch says he is not over on that shavua unless the lender asked for his money. As long as he didn't ask to get his money back, it is not a violation of the shavua. And the Ktsaisa Choshen goes on, a gewaltige Chiddush, to say that this question would depend on a very famous disagreement between the Radbaz and the Chacham Tzvi. Person is in custody, he is in jail, and the authorities said you could choose one day to go home. Which day should he choose? Should he wait for Pesach? He should be able to mekayim Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim with his family and matzah and morah and dalet koises, or should he take advantage of the first opportunity and say, tomorrow morning I'll daven with minyan? So the Ksai says maybe this question is dependent on that argument, which is a very far-fetched comparison, but we don't have time to go into that. Nesevus HaMishpat Kuf Dalet Sif Kot Nalev disagrees with the Ksais, and he says, Shavua Lachod and Priyas Balchayv Lachod. When a person swears, what he has in mind is, the moment you'll ask for your money, I'll give it. But as long as you don't ask, that is not what he had in mind when he made that Shavua. But Priyas Balchayv doesn't depend at all if I ask or not. When payday is up, you need to be forthcoming and pay. The Shach Reish Lamed Beis, and this is a far greater Chiddush, Reish Lamed Beis, Sif Kotten Beis, quotes the Shiltei Gaborim. Shiltei Gaborim says, if a person gave me a loan, what page is the Shach? 364. So the Shach quotes the Shiltei Gaborim, which is a far greater Chiddush. Person lent me money, he's not asking to get his money back. I could assume, it's a very short quote. שאמר ולחברו ואינו תובע הלוואוסוי, אינה לוי וחייב לשלם לוי מאליו. הואיל ואינו תובע, במתונה ביקש ליתן לוי, וצורכים בזה. The Shach comments, he doesn't totally reject this opinion, but he says, somewhat questionable. And that is how we understand tzorachiyun. So the Shiltei Gaborim goes to the extreme. As long as he doesn't ask for his money, it's mine. And we assume probably wants to give me a gift. The Ktsois doesn't go that far, and the Ktsois says, the loan is intact, I will need to pay, but as long as he doesn't ask, I don't need to initiate and pay. The Nesiva says, when time is up, you have a chiyuv to pay, and that is the din of Priyas Bal Choiv Mitzvah, whether he's asking for that money or not. Lani is daiti. Somewhat of a compromise, not really a compromise, but I think there are three different levels and three different scenarios and situations. When an extremely close friend gives you a loan, or a father to his children, or a wealthy child to a needy parent gives you a loan, and he doesn't ask you to pay that loan, and he's not senile, and you rightfully assume he's not forgetful, he's aware you didn't forget about that loan, then you could assume he doesn't want that money back, and especially if he offered you that loan. Because in Gemara we find, and it's in Shulchan Aruch as well, one of the most beautiful ways to give tzedakah and not make the recipient feel bad about taking tzedakah is to say, I have some extra money, I want to give you a loan, and what you really have in mind is, I'll never ask for the money back, keep it. And in that case, the Shiltig Aboidim is right, and maybe that is what he means. If you have reason to assume that he didn't really have in mind to give a loan, but rather a gift, and to make you more comfortable, he said, it's a loan. The Ktsaisachoshen is reasonable in a situation in which it is clear that he doesn't want to give a gift, but he's not pressed for the money. And many times we give a loan, and when the person says, I have money to pay, and we say, and it always happens in family, I give my children a loan, and when they want to pay, I say, I'm not desperate. If you could still use the money, use the money. And that is the situation that Ktsaisachoshen would be talking about. If he's not asking for his money, obviously, he doesn't read the money right here and now. It's a loan. It's not a gift. It's not yours to keep. But he's aware, and he's not embarrassed to ask for the money. Then you are entitled to assume he doesn't mind if I'll pay at a later date. But fundamentally, Priyas Balchoiv is a chiyuv, and it does not depend whether the lender asks for money or not. In Minchas Osher and Chumash Devarim, I don't remember which siman, there's a lengthy discussion about ribis. That means not taking ribis, but ribis tutsi yoytze b'dayonim and shoichad. There's a huge machlokes Taz and Sma whether you need to return a ribis if the one that gave the ribis is not asking for his money, or shoichad. I think ribis and shoichad stand apart, because if not the Isser Shel Torah, that would be a kinyan gomer. The person that gave ribis knows why he's giving ribis, because he got a loan, and the entire world assumes money is worth money. Why would you expect a person to give you a loan and not paying for it? The Rashba on Shuvas HaMiyachos Reish Chov Gimel writes, ribis is be'etzem schirus. What's the difference between renting a house, renting a car, renting an animal, or renting money? But the Torah answers, and therefore ribis ktsutze yoytze b'dayonim only if the one that gave is requesting his money back, and the same goes to shoichad. But haloah, milse de pshita. You got a loan. You need to pay the loan, regardless of whether he's asking or not. So mitzvahs priyas balchayiv definitely is a chiyuv gomer, whether he asks for his money back or not. And the only rationale to say, as long as it didn't ask, you don't need to give, is either when we assume it's a gift, that's the Shiltig Aboidim, and that would be applicable and reasonable when we're dealing with family members or close friends and the recipient has a fair reason to believe, not that he wants to convince himself, but it is reasonable to assume that the lender actually wants to give a gift. Or, in the case of the Ktsois, if it is reasonable to assume, yes, we made up a time, but the fact that he doesn't ask for his money means I don't mind if you keep my money a bit longer, and when I will need the money, I will ask. So let me speak a few minutes about Loisia Loikenoisha, even though I don't have time really to speak about this at great length, but it is important. The lav Loisia Loikenoisha is Mavu and Rambam, the Shechanoch, it is only if I know that he does not have money to pay. If I am a supik whether he has money, I am entitled to ask for that money. And I think it is a pity that people are more machmir loisiyah loikenosha than they are in the mitzvah of im kesef tal vesami and haba talia, because we are afraid we can never ask for the money. That is why we are reluctant and we prefer not to give the money, and that is a total mistake. Loisiyah loikenosha, I will explain this mitzvah. Loisiyah loikenosha is, I know that he doesn't have money to pay. So why are you asking when he can't give? Because I'm angry. I'm angry and I want to hurt him. It is revenge. You're not paying, I'm going to embarrass you. I'm going to hurt you. That is the issur of loisiyah loikenosha. If he might have money, I am entitled to ask, please pay the loan. This issur applies only if I know that he doesn't have money. And it is very hard to know that a person doesn't have money. If you're mesupik whether he has money, you are entitled to ask for your money back. In a society in which people, what we call in Eretz Yisrael is legalgel, gilgulei ksafim. In a society in which people constantly take one loan to pay another, even if he doesn't have money, you are entitled to ask, give my money back. As you always do. Lend money from someone else to pay me. Loisiyah loikenosha is only when you're hurting a person and it's futile. Why are you tormenting him? You know that he doesn't have money. You know that he can't pay. So what's the point in tormenting him? Just to embarrass him, to hurt his feelings? That is loisiyah loikenosha. But if I assume that if I ask he will pay, that is not loisiyah loikenosha. And therefore, it is a mistake to assume I'm not going to give a loan because I can't ask for it back. Of course you could ask for it back. It is only if you know it's futile. You know that he doesn't have money to pay. And the only reason is just to hurt him because you want to vent your anger. That is the lav of loisiyah loikenosha. So in the vast majority of cases, person that gave a loan and the recipient, the borrower, didn't pay, you are entitled to ask for your money back. Do it with rachamim. Don't hurt his feelings. Don't do it in public. Chas v'sholom, don't be a malbim pnei chaverei berabim. But you are entitled to gently ask, my dear friend, could you pay the loan? Time has come. I could use the money. That is not a issur of loisiyah loikenosha.
If you're not sure he has the money,
What?
do you have to be sure or not sure he has the money?
It is only if you're sure he doesn't have. If he might have, you are entitled to ask for the money. The issur of loisiyah loikenosha is only when I know that he can't pay, that he doesn't have the money. Is there a chiyuv to put? Maybe I didn't understand the question. What's a due? A date. Even if there is a date, there is no issur of loisiyah loikenosha, and if there's not a date, there also is no issur of loisiyah loikenosha. Loisiyah loikenosha does not depend whether there's a date or not. It only depends, could he pay or can't he pay? Now, there's a din of mesader and a b'chayv. Mesader and b'chayv means he needs to sell stuff in order to pay. If he could sell stuff, there's no loisiyah loikenosha. If he has an expensive car, even if I know he doesn't have money to pay, but you could sell your car and you could pay. That would not be loisiyah loikenosha. So loisiyah loikenosha is a very limited lav. We are wonderful people. We are machmar loisiyah loikenosha 10 times over, but the result is, it is one of the reasons that we don't give loans. And therefore, I think we should be less machmir loisiyah loikenosha and more forthcoming in giving loans, because people have a big mistake regarding the lav of loisiyah loikenosha.
Does Heter is to nullify the
Does a heter iske nullify the mitzvah? Oh. You always ask good questions, Reb Gedalia Mordcha. We see each other once a week. Maybe we'll see each other tonight. Maybe. Or one shit a day is enough. Is there a mitzvah halvoah if it's a heter iska? So, are we going to talk about heter iska? We said ribis is out. I think if you're doing a heter iska, that is not the mitzvah of halvoah. The mitzvah of halvoah is exclusively chesed. And many times, heter iska is all about money, most times, and that is not the mitzvah of halvoah. That is a business deal, and it's not the mitzvah of halvoah. Could a person take a loan knowing that in all likelihood he cannot pay that loan? So the Mishnah Masechet Avos says, Eze midah toiva sheyidbak bo odom haroyes hanoiled. Eze midah rosh yitrachek mimeno ha'odom lo yiveroshe v'lo yishalem. Rabbeinu Yoina explains, Eze midah rosh yitrachek mimeno ha'odom. If you know you're not going to be able to pay that loan, you cannot take it. And if you take a loan, knowing that in all likelihood you can't pay, and you don't pay, and you don't have a ptur of oines, what could I do? I don't have money. But you knew you won't have money. And you're not entitled to take a loan unless you have some plan how I will pay that loan. It could be by lending money from another person. But it is only if it is likely you will find another person that will be willing to lend. And at some stage, it's like a pyramid, like all these schemes. At some stage, you run out of opportunities because the same person would not be willing to give you a loan every 3 months, again and again and again and again. So the Rabbeinu Yoina says, you cannot take a loan if you don't have a plan how I will pay, and you will need to do with the minimal possible, but you can't take a loan if you don't know how I will pay that loan. However, in Beis Tezvav Amid Beis, the Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Lavu alai, Leitzos Shabbos v'Yom Tov va'ani poreya. So when a person needs for Shabbos and Yom Tov, obviously the Gemara says, Kodesh Baruch Hu says, take a loan and I will pay. It's not very common, but for some years I used to spend Shabbos in the middle of the summer in one of the, once it was called the bungalow colony, no longer, those are no bungalows any longer. But a development, I think that's what they're called today, these beautiful huge houses.
Luxury development.
Luxury developments. And the Kiddush after davening, was 100 years ago, a family of 10 kids could live a month from the Kiddush after davening that is offered for the Olam. So that is not included in Lavu Olai V'ani Poreya. That is not legitimate in Lavu Alai V'ani Poreya. But I saw Shabbos and Yom Tov, which is Lechem, Mishnah, Yayin, Lekiddush, V'Avdola, Bosa, V'Dogim, Lavu Alai V'ani Poreya. However, the Mishnah Berurah in Reishman Beis writes, Kadosh Baruch Hu will help you, B'siyata D'Shmaya, but you need to have a plan. And even for Itzur Shabbos v'Yom Tov, you cannot take a loan if you know in advance, in all likelihood, you will not be able to pay. Tosfos asked that question in Beis Tezvav Amud Beis. And that's a Gemara in Psochim Kuf Yud Beis. Asay Shabbat Chochol Va'al Tetztarech Lebrios. And the answer in Tosfos is exactly what the Mishnah Berurah says in Sha'ar Tziyun and Reish Mem Beis. Tosfos says, "Asela bat choil kishe'ein lo meheichen lefroya." If you know you can't pay, asay shabat choil. But the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Terazov, and he disagrees. And the Goen, and as the Goas and Shas has a different gersa. And the Goen says, "Asay Shabbat Rechoil im ein lo memi lilvois." You did this 50 times the last year. You took a loan and you said you need it for Shabbos. As I said before, you ran out. You ran out of great people that are willing to help you with your Kiddush on Shabbos. So according to the Goen, "Asay Shabbat Rechoil kishe'ein lo memi lilvois." Our gersa in Tosfos is ein lo meheichen lefroya. So the Goen says, "Oitzur Shabbos v'Yom Tov," you could borrow money even without a cheshbon how I will pay. But it is clear to me that is the minimal Oitzur Shabbos v'Yom Tov, to be mekayim the mitzvah shalosh seudos and oinig Shabbos, but not beyond that. Okay, if you have an Orev, and that is what Arvis is all about. So that will bring us to the next sugya, which will be Dinam Orev, and I hope to see you tomorrow and enjoy every moment of this unbelievable schus. Hundreds of people learning Torah in Yerushalayim Yir HaKodesh.